Okay, here we go. See how this live stream goes. I've been having a discussion with an old Earth believer, Christian believer, and he's pretty argumentative, and like so many people, they think they know it all and they got all the answers and everything. And so he has a bunch of videos on why young Earth creationists are wrong in his opinion, his mind. So I've been having a little discussion with him, and he's, like I said, he's very argumentative, but it's probably still interesting nonetheless, to some people. And I just wanted to show who he is, and I don't know if I could show a video of what he's like or not, but anyways, but I just want to show the discussion mostly with him. So let's go to the videotape. He calls himself the Word Room, or his channel is called the Word Room. So let's go to the Word Room here. This is his channel, and of course, there he is talking about Ken Ham and Ken Hovind, and he's saying Adam didn't start like this, and so like everything that the Bible says, he's got to rearrange it and say that it doesn't say that. And he's got a whole bunch of videos, and he's very determined or convinced or whatever. Here you go. 900 plus year old men, biblical ages of the earth and timeline he disagrees with. Of course, he probably has a problem with Israel too, which I think I've seen before, but I kind of forgot what the contact was. But maybe, see, we'll show a little thing of what he says. What's this? What do you got here? I haven't seen these, but Aaron Ra, okay. The Hebrew Bible says God has no son, the word son. They got all these ideas that are all different than what, mainstream Christianity would teach. Atheist, Aaron Ra. Okay, it's all about atheism. Let's see if we got Genesis firmament. No man seen God. Double standard, bias against Christian. So apparently he's out there. He does have a lot of content for atheists and stuff. Apparently. But of course, he's got a bunch of oddball beliefs. And of course, he has this one here where he's talking about the age, lifespan of people and young earth creationists. But anyways, see, instead of showing that, I just wanted to go through some of my discussion with him. It might take a little time to find it, bring it up here, but I think it'll work here. Just to give an idea of what some of the things he says. I guess I'll go ahead and go to the replies. This is one discussion thread that we're having. We had multiple threads. And sometimes you want to stick to one thread, but in this case here, I got to I got to bring them all up in order to see them to the end. And I wanted to show the end so far as far as our discussion's gotten going. Okay, so that's the end there. And you can see he's very argumentative, almost childlike, almost childish in his the way he talks. Okay, so here's my point here. The idea of a local flood is preposterous. Of course, he believes in a local flood. Our entire human history began again after the global flood. He says, oh, there's no support for that. No, you have to show support to the contrary, because the only history we have is from the global flood, which, I don't know, maybe he's beginning to see that. I don't know. But so I asked him, oh, the Bible's not evidence? He says there's no evidence to support that. So the Bible's not evidence? The Bible does not say that our entire human history began after the flood. So nope, the Bible is not evidence for your claim. Of course it says it. That's why I asked you about the Table of Nations. He says the Table of Nations doesn't say that our entire human history began after the global flood. I don't know if I can make this larger here. Nah, well, oh, there you go. And I say, sure it does. They were survivors of the global flood. Okay, you've shown no evidence of a global flood, and yes, they survived the local flood. That does not say our entire human history began after the global flood. And there you go, try again. So I just say, deny everything the Bible says, why don't you? Oops, it's not going. Uh-oh. Well, it's not, okay. Says, nope, not denying what the Bible says. I'm denying your interpretation of what the Bible says. Your interpretation is not the Bible. And I say, well, your interpretation is? I guess his interpretation must be better than mine. If I can get this thing to work. Somehow it's not working when I do that. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. All right. So your interpretation is, and it's all rearranges. Of course, he has to rearrange everything the Bible says. He has to rearrange it for the old Earth mindset. And says, no, I never said my interpretation was the Bible. Of course, he's very argumentative, long responses, very argumentative. And here he's humble enough to recognize he's a fallible human, and the possible interpretation is incorrect. In order to show it's incorrect, you have to actually have evidence to show it's incorrect. And not just assert that I'm incorrect. But anyways, of course, we know he is incorrect because, the Bible says one thing, he said another. Anytime a person feels a need to use many words on a single point, they're probably trying hard to convince themselves. That goes on and on. Not trying to convince myself. I hear a lot of words and little substance. The earth was divided. So I went ahead and went into the idea that the earth was divided in the days of Pegasus. The earth was divided, and that's what the evidence shows. Or maybe it was another thread I did. Okay, there's been tons of substance and you just ignored it. Many words isn't substance. You have to talk specifics and get to the point. Of course, he's talking plate tectonics, but he's talking millions of years. He believes in millions of years, which is not supported. And it goes on and on and on and on. Anyways, this is, we go to the end, I guess. So he has a tendency to be talking about me, saying I'm this, I'm that, and instead of talking about the subject, so still talking about me. There's a bottleneck. There is a bottleneck. You can follow all the migrations, and then I get to the C. C is the Hamitic descendants of Nimrod. You can follow the migration. D is the Sinaites of Canaan. You can follow that migration on HRAS, the Y-fold genome. You can follow it on the map, all the migrations. Okay, Denisovans are mixing Neanderthals. Okay. And just to show how he's argues like a child, like a kid, still talking about me, talking about you. He tries to turn around and say, well, I'm talking about him. But no, I'm not spending time talking about him. I'm mentioning him, but I'm not spinning a whole thread just talking about him. But he doesn't seem to understand it. But the claim that the haplogroups like the C and the D represent specific biblical lineages is speculative, lacks genetic and historical. He just mixing all this stuff up. It's not speculative because it can't be anybody else. Genetic bottleneck. He doesn't even believe that humans have a genetic bottleneck. He doesn't know. Well, believe is one thing. He doesn't even know about the genetic bottleneck. And here, the most well-supported bottleneck in human genetics occurred 70,000 years to 100,000 years ago, likely from a Toba supereruption or migration out of Africa. So he's even talking about a migration out of Africa. So he's got all kinds of things wrong, and he's got to support it. Now, I haven't known him that much to make a determination whether he's serious about what he is. I assume he is because he's talking to unbelievers and atheists, but trying to convince them of an old earth and creation, which is walking on two sides of the fence. Okay, Noah-sized bottleneck, 8 people, 4,500 years ago would leave extremely low genetic diversity today. That's not what we see. The truth is that every human is very much alike, as Donnie and Matt would say. Because they've studied it, how much everybody's like each other or alike. And of course, we've all suffered genetic decay, genetic decay or entropy of the genome together, which is another reason why we're like each other, is that we're all decaying together. Okay, the mitochondrial even Y chromosome atom live tens of thousands of years apart, not together on the arc. they live. How can they have lived tens of thousands of years apart? How can you have any children that way? It doesn't even make sense. Anyway. But he says you can't map haplogroups to Bible characters. You can't match haplogroups of Bible characters to claiming C is Ham or D is the Sinaites. Well, C is a lineage of Ham. It's a Hamitic lineage, but it's Cush. I mean, it's, son of Cush, Nimrod. Of course, A, B, C, D, and E are Ham, descendants of Ham. Okay, haplogroups reflect mutations in the Y chromosome. They're not ethnic groups or nations. Leagues like C and D branch off before the flood. What? Lineage like C and D branch off? No, because C is in Mesopotamia. Even among Semitic peoples, we see haplogroup variations. Proving descent isn't strictly traceable to specific biblical patriarch. The descendants of Neanderthals, your timeline doesn't match. Your timeline is way off. 400,000 years ago is absurd. And that's the main reason they can't understand, because they believe in millions of years. Aboriginal Australians and Melanesians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA, meaning their ancestors were mixing with Denisovan tens of thousands of years. We know what the story is. You don't have to repeat the story, because we've heard it before. What the Bible actually emphasizes, Genesis 10, the tables of nations, is theological geography, not a literal genetic tree of the whole world. It's about how nations formed, not chromosomes. Actually, it is about actual history, which he doesn't realize, because every ancient civilization is from the 16 grandsons of Noah. And there's no other nations besides the 16 grandsons of Noah, which is, I guess, hard for him to understand. I don't know. Okay. Says I'm wrong. The biblical writers didn't have a concept of DNA. Claiming C haplogroup means Ham. No, it means Nimrod. I didn't say it means Ham. The human bottleneck is real. The similarity in genomes between people is real. It's a fact. As for the C haplogroup, there's no other Hamitic king in Mesopotamia early on, such that it can only be of the house of Nimrod, which is it's a difference between, in Bible teaching, you can know what the truth is, what the absolute truth is, because the Bible teaches absolute truth. In science, they say you can't know absolute truth. Well, because they don't know what the absolute truth is. So they have to say that a theory says that show a theory that is in agreement with such and such evidence or something like that. That's what they have to say in science to be scientific, according to them. But as Christians, teaching what the Bible says, we can say what is absolutely true. There was a house of Nimrod, and it's very significant. And that's another thing, is that I always wondered, well, I know that what God puts in the Bible is there for a reason. And it's hard to understand what the significance of, so what if there was this King Nimrod and he was a great hunter, and he, took over or built Akkad or whatever, Akkad, the city Akkad, for the Akkadians. It's written right in the Bible then. It's written right in the Bible. Nimrod built Akkad, the city of Akkad, the Akkadians. Nimrod's the father of the Akkadians. It's written right in the Bible. So the Bible is parallel with human history. It's not separate. The way they present Sumerians and stuff is that it's just a totally, Sumerian history is one thing and the Bible is another thing completely separate. No, the Bible is parallel to the Sumerian history. Abraham was a Sumerian from a Sumerian city called Ur. And people need to realize that. Abraham had a run-in with the Akkadian king Nimrod. That's how simultaneous the Bible is with human history. You can't separate it because it's one and the same history. So I said, as for the paternal seed, there's no other Hamitic king in Mesopotamia early on, such that it can only be of the house of Nimrod. For example, when Israel wanted a king, that's the kind of king that they wanted. Remember, Israel said, we want a king like the nations. They were saying, we want a king like Nimrod. So that's what they had. God said that it's not what he wanted. He said Israel wants a king because they don't want me to be king. But he still let them have a king. And that's the same thing. And we know they had hundreds of wives. King David and King Solomon, hundreds of wives and concubines. And well, what you're going to have when you have that, you're going to reinforce your genetics in the population. So Nimrod, with many wives and concubines, it's called the house of Nimrod, of course, is going to reinforce his genes in the population. Because when you have one child, you have half of the father, half of the mother, and it's only half, and then your genes are going to be diluted in successive generations with just one child. But if you have many, many, many children, sons, you're going to have each child that you have is not going to be the same half of your genome that made the first child. And every time you have a child, unless they're identical twins, it's going to be a different half of your genome and a different half of the wife's genomes or the concubine or whatever it is. So the effect, this is one thing that I had a hard time understanding, is how did Nimrod's gene become so strong in the population? It's because of his many sons and daughters in the population they all had half of his genes and not the same half. So if you have hundreds of kids or whatever it is, with each of the hundreds of wives, you're going to have replicated basically your entire genome in the population, which reinforces the genes of a person in the population. And that's why the Olmec statues look Polynesian because they have the same common ancestor with the Polynesians and the same admixture of Kushite and Eurasian, and that's the reason why his genomes became so much reinforced in the population, and of course numerically spread over the whole globe as far as his paternal haplogroup is. That's why the C, it ranges from Europe all the way to South America, is because of his many sons that he had that carried his Y chromosome, that spread his Y chromosome across the whole world. So that's the reason why I'm saying it can't be anybody else. It can only be the house of Nimrod, because there's no other king early on besides the son of Cush, Nimrod. He's the only king early on that had a house of Nimrod, like the house of David in the Bible, which is a replication of the house of Nimrod. So it's not like the house of David and Solomon came first, because the house of Nimrod came first, and then the house of David and Solomon. But that's the kind of king that they wanted. And likewise, genetically, the paternal D haplogroup can only be the descendant of either Put, Canaan, or Mitzrayim, because the D haplogroup is only compatible with being descended from E1, E2, or E3, Mitzrayim. It's not compatible with C genetically, because C has the what they call a CF SNP marker. It's M168, something like that, and he has it, and the D and the E do not have it. So it's not compatible with C, but it is compatible with Put, or E1, E2, and E3, Put, Canaan, and Mitzrayim. And of course, the A and B is Cush, the other brothers of Nimrod. So A and B is the other brothers of Nimrod, and C is Nimrod, is all the descendants of Nimrod in Asia, because C never went to Africa, went everywhere else in the world. It never went to Africa, the C haplogroup. Probably because either they didn't want to go or whatever, they didn't think it was good, or maybe they thought it was family. I don't know, which they probably would have forgotten, but for whatever reason, they never went to Africa. And of course, all his wives were Semitic mostly, and the later generations were Eurasian or Asian. So, and of course, we have that problem with this here image here. The image of man doesn't like what we post, what we Christians post, and it just deletes your comments outright. So just hoping that it doesn't delete my posts, because it does all the time. So his response, saying, oh, it's like you're not even paying attention to what's being said. You're just regurgitating your script. Listen to what I am saying and quit ignoring it. Listen to me. Listen to what I am saying. Quit ignoring. Very argumentative. Everyone agrees there's human bottlenecks. Everyone agrees genomes. Everyone agrees having a common ancestor. That's not the issue, period. So, yes, those are real, but those things do not go back to Noah. They don't go back to Noah. Where do they go? That's where you're struggling to comprehend. Yeah, that's until he can accept Noah with it's not even capitalized. He's not going to be able to understand. It's not going to sink into his head. As long as he believes in millions of years, which is very, very unbiblical, even though they say they're Christians and they believe they're Christians. It's very, very unbiblical. Okay, there's zero genetic historical evidence linking haplogroup C to Nimrod, which I just went through, and I would disagree with that very much. Haplogroup C is one of the oldest y-DNA lineages found in indigenous. We know where it's found, and some Siberian. He didn't even say it's in America. We know where the C is found, okay? You don't have to tell us where it's found. Nimrod is described as being Mesopotamian king. The Mesopotamian remains like from Sumer to Akkad show completely different haplogroups, J and T. Today they're J and T, but it's not like the C is not there because they spread out. When they spread out, they tend to be more prevalent wherever they go to than wherever they came from many times. Claiming there's no other Hamitic king is circular. You're assuming what you're trying to prove. Okay, so if it's not Nimrod, what Hamitic king is it? There is no other Hamitic king. It's like it's just being argumentative, but he's not resolving anything with his arguments. Haplogroup D is most common. We know where it's at. Andamanese, Japanese, Chinese, and Tibetans. And all the way up in the Altai Mountains. You don't have to tell us where. Look, it says not anywhere near Canaan, Egypt, or Put. Of course, because they started out in Mesopotamia, and he never went to Mesopotamia. I mean, he never went to Africa. Of course, he's not in Canaan, Egypt, or Put. This is the haplogroup D. This would be the Sinites. And the D, some of D did go to Africa because they were in the Sinai region, but Nimrod's descendants never went to Africa. But most of the D is outside of Africa too, because of course they started in Canaan and moved south to Sinai, and from Sinai moved over to the land of Sinim. So, and he says, okay, the similarity between Sino, Sinim, Sinai is coincidental. They come from different languages, unrelated roots. Sino comes from the Latin for Shina. But it's Latin for Shina for a reason, because of the Sinites. I mean, you can have the same word in different languages all the time. Sinim's a Hebrew word. Of course, we know it's Hebrew. Sinai comes from Semitic roots. Now he says possibly linked to the moon god Sin. Sin is the actual son of Canaan. And that's typical ancestry worship. Asher was a god. Asher is the founder of the Assyrians. Can't use genetics to prove biblical lineages. Modern haplogroups are built from mutation pattern, not tribal records. This is just so much non-argument. So it just goes on and on and on and on. Yeah. I'm cherry picking, ignoring science, and no, just present the evidence and see if it's good enough to convince me. It doesn't matter how many times you continue to repeat it, and me, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. This is what I'm talking about. You're trying to, your interpreter sounds like it's something behind you. Instead of talking about me, address the issue, and all this other stuff is meaningless anyway. So here's my final response so far. So the contradiction is in your mind because he says it's contradicting, whatever. Think for a second about the house of Nimrod. He, like David and Solomon, had many wives and concubines. This literally reinforced the genes of Nimrod within his household and later in the population, so that today his Hamitic paternal haplogroup is spread worldwide from Europe to South America. What other Hamitic Cushite king was there from the beginning in Mesopotamia? The answer is that there was none. So it has to be Nimrod. And this is what first got me started. This is not the most convincing proof of a haplogroup, but it was convincing enough for me to become interested in the identification of the haplogroups of who they are descended from. But his problem is that he doesn't believe what the Bible says. He doesn't believe in Noah. He doesn't believe what the Bible said, that all of humanity existing today came from the 16 ancient civilizations that are from the 16 grandsons of Noah. And if people would know ancient history, they would know that those 16 nations came from the 16 grandsons of Noah. And of course, later on, there was a lot of mixing of genetic haplogroups. Anyway, see how things are going over here. Hold on a minute. Guess we'll go back. Where are we going? Oh, we're going back over here. There's Doki. Hello, Doki. Don't know. Hello. Nope. Hello, Doki. I can't put my coffee cup in there right now, so I just say hello, Doki. Anyway, so that's that. I could go on, but I have things to do. And maybe some more discussions too. Anyway, that's good enough for today, I think. And hope to see everybody soon. But it's just amazing that there's people that don't believe what the Bible actually says, and they got to figure out, we call it mental gymnastics. He says, everybody says he's doing mental gymnastics because he is doing mental gymnastics. So disagrees with the age of in the Bible. you're disagreeing with what the Bible says. If you disagree that the earth was divided, you're disagreeing with what the Bible says. It's as simple as that. Here we go. Somebody's Coco Loco. See what Coco Loco has to say here. No one has the DNA of a fictional character. And these guys aren't serious anyway. They're just you can tell by his name, Coco Loco. So, since they're not serious, let's see. No one has DNA of the fictional character. Your ancestors aren't fictional. Not fictional. Okay. Oh, here's my latest genetic information here, right here. Let's blow this up a little bit. This is the latest genetic information. Well, I have to keep this thing in sight here. Noah's grandsons via Shem. This is interesting. Everybody has are both the descendants of Japheth, Shem, and one of the descendants of Ham, which is Nimrod, has this M168 marker. It's the only marker that there is, SNP marker, that ties everyone together, even though the majority or the other descendants of Ham do not have this M168 marker. But the descendants of Nimrod do have it, and he's Cushite, Hamitic Cushite, because he was the oldest one. He retains this M168 marker that the sons of Shem and the sons of Japheth have. But Nimrod's brothers and cousins do not carry this marker. In fact, there is no, which I didn't realize, which is very important, there is no genetic marker that ties A and B or even D and E with the rest of the world. There's no genetic marker that they share with the rest of the world. This is the only marker that's shared with everyone except for the other brothers of Nimrod and his cousins don't have this, but everybody else in the world has this genetic marker, M168. So the grandsons of Noah's grandsons via Shem. So you have Arphaxad, the Chaldeans, Hebrews. This here is, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Espécie. As Grok put that in there, I don't know. Anyways, the region, Mesopotamia, that's where Arphaxad lineage was. Abraham, of course, was there in And the Y haplogroup is IJ. Now, these are shared markers here, M168, but this M429, this is the SNP marker that only Arphaxad shares with his uncle Japheth. This marker M429 is the SNP marker that only Arphaxad shares with his uncle Japheth. Elam and the rest do not have it. They do not share that marker. Of course, within I and J, we have the M170, which is I, which is me, and the M267, which is J1, and the M172, which is basically Judah, or J2. So there's probably, it could be some Israel still in J2 as well, other tribes of Israel, but these are the SNP markers or the lineages of both Jews and Arabs and me, which I'm from Scotland, but I have this paternal haplogroup marker here from Arphaxad, and which is from Abraham and Israel too, and Jacob. If this is Dan, if the I is Dan, which I believe it to be, then this I-70 was, well, it's in Dan. I can't say whether or not it was in Israel or Jacob or Abraham, but these here, M267 is Israelite, or we know for a fact that it's the tribe of Levi has that marker, because it's a J1 P58 that is a colon modal haplotype, which positively identifies this lineage of IJ being from Arphaxad. Because, of course, Levi's, the tribe of Levi's the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, through Eber, all the way to Arphaxad in Ur of the Chaldeans. So the mtDNA is, the Semitic is in the area of the H, J, K, in the Levant, area of the Levant. SNP markers are these, plus the M170, which Grok didn't include, and I forgot to put it in there. I put the M170 in here, but I forgot to put it in here. But that would be the I. The M170s are the I, M172 is J2, M267 is J1, which is both Jews and Arabs. This one, I think, is mostly Judah, possibly Israelite tribes as well. So that's about that. And then we get to Elam. Oops, wrong one. What did I do? Did I lose it? I loosed it. So we get to Elam. He's a H. He has the 168 and the M69. So this is the shared SNP marker that he has with most rest of the world, and this is the specific marker, SNP marker of Elam, and it's H. And for Asher, it's G. So he has the 168 that shared by, everybody to the right of Nimrod, the way it's listed alphabetically. And the specific marker is M201. Lydian, or Lud, of the Lydians in Anatolia. Again, he has the 168 marker that Nimrod has, and the rest of the world to the right of Nimrod. And now Lud has this, what Grok calls basal, which is M89. Okay, so let me see. This is Lud. Yeah, this is Lud. Because there's two F lineages, they're completely separate from each other. So I finally determined, because there's over here, there's F1, 2, 3, and 4. These are all basically the same lineages, and they're found all the way to India, or on the way to India, or throughout India, in different places in India. Each one of these haplogroups, F1, F2, F3, they say they're rare. They're rare, but they're found in the area of India because of the Arameans that had control of the trade routes to India. Now, another important thing to note is that the Lydians were also traders. So I still have this F1, 2, 3, 4 as designated to Aram because they were the traders, but some of these Lydians apparently were traders as well because they were very rich and did a lot of trading. And so I have them assigned as F, undefined, or F undefined, because it also goes to India. It's also in India, and it's also rare. It's also rare. Turkey, speculative. Anyways, it's F undefined, but it's a separate lineage. In other words, they didn't have a letter to give it, probably. So that's the way I have it up until now, anyways, for now. Oh, if I can find this, there it is. And so they have their S&P markers, F1, 2, 3, and 4. And now we go to the Noah's Grandsons by Japheth. Again with the M168 marker that everyone shares. Now, the descendants of Japheth all have this M9. So they're all going to have M9 as well as the 168 and the M429. Remember, M429, this marker is shared by Arphaxad and Japheth. So there we have the M49 shared by Arphaxad and Japheth. And the one that's not shared would be M9 and M207 with Gomer. So Gomer has M9 and M207 as a special marker or a specific marker. Okay. Of course, Gomer has 3 sons, each one with their own marker: Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. And his specific marker is M17, M198. And the specific marker for Riphath is M343 and M269. And R2 is M124. the specific marker for Togarma. Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarma, the sons of Gomer. Now, then we have Magog. Magog has, of course, the 168, the 429, and the M9, and the specific marker is 214. Madai, of course, has 168, the 429 shared with Arphaxad, the M9, which only the sons of Japheth have, and the M242 is specific to the Medes, or Madai. And Javan has the T marker, the T haplogroup. It's M168 that he has, M429, M9 that only the sons of Japheth have, and his specific marker is M70. And that's the T. I don't know if I mentioned the other one is R1A, R1B, and R2. The descendants of Gomer. Ashkenaz, Riphath, Togarma. R1A, R1B, R2. Okay, the Medes, Javan, Tubal. So Tubal has the designation of K, which K is a specific lineage of Tubal, but it's also a lineage. I mean, it's its own lineage, but it also includes all the other descendants of Japheth that all have this M9 and the M249. But this M249, all the sons of Japheth have, but they share it with the descendants of Arphaxad, myself included. So, and this one's shared with everyone, including Nimrod, but not Nimrod's brothers and cousins. Okay, so we got Meshach. Let me see. Meshach, of course, is NO. Where's P? No, Meshach is, what am I thinking? Meshach is P, because I didn't know that was a lineage, but it's a lineage in Eastern Europe and East Asia. So Meshach has what everybody else has, M9, and the specific marker for Meshach is M45, which is very, very important because the SNP does not lie. The SNP markers are absolute, as absolute as you can get in science. Of course, these markers all can be gained and lost, and I guess in some of the populations they're lost or gained. Of course, they're gaining other SNP markers as well, but they can be either gained or lost. It's more common to gain a marker than it is to lose it, but it's clear that sometimes they're lost. Okay, so we have Meshach. Tiraz would be the Thracians. The Thracians have everything. The specific marker of the Thracians is M20. That's a specific marker. We have Noah. We have Noah's grandsons via Ham. That'd be Cush, Mitzrayim, Canaan, and Put. So Cush only has, okay, only Nimrod has. So now it's going to be A and B. Cush is A and B. No M168 means it doesn't have M168, except Nimrod, the oldest son of Cush, does have it because he shares it with his uncles Shem and Japheth, which he can share because he's the oldest, but none of his younger brothers and cousins share this marker. So there's no M168 for A, B, D, and E. Okay, Mitzrayim. This marker is, the M68, M103, M78. There's a whole bunch of other markers as well, but it's a very, very large population because Mitzrayim had many sons as well. And it's a very large, it's the largest African lineage besides maybe Nimrod. With many lineages, but it's E3. This E1B, 1B. This is E1B, 1B. Supposed to be E3. But, Grok mixes up things, confuses things a lot of times. So you got to, check for mistakes that Grok makes. Okay, there's Canaan. So Canaan is E1B1A according to Grok, but it's E2. It's E2. So Canaan is E2, and the special marker of Canaan is M2. Okay, we have now we have Noah's great grandsons. His great grandsons are Nimrod and Sin of the Sinite Canaanite tribe. So Nimrod's Sumerian Akkadian rulers, of course, he has M168, but his specific marker is M130. Sinite, Levantine East Asian tribe. This is the one that went to China, Japan, Tibet. Of course, no, they don't have. No, this is wrong. D does not have M168. Does not have. Grok made a mistake there. The Sinite tribe does not have this M168. It's XDE. This marker is CFXDE, means it's XD and XE. So Grok forgot to put in there that it's no M168. I have to remind it. I have to tell him to do it all over again. You messed up. The D haplogroup is XDE, does not have this SNP marker. Because Grok forgets it sometimes. Okay, so that's about it. No one has the DNA of, no, they're real characters and they're your ancestors. And we have these haplogroups lined up very well, I have to admit, to all the grandsons of Noah, which are the 16 ancient civilizations. So that just about, messes up everything for this video, I guess. Or did I? I didn't even put that thing back, did I? I didn't even put it back. So I messed up another video. What's new? Okay. All right, everybody take care. So I guess I've been going along too long. I got stuff to do myself. So God bless everybody. Take care.